right in. Really exciting to be here and to be presenting today, and I'm glad to see so many people on the call. So thanks for being here. I'm really excited to talk about habitat and pollinator habitat in general. So this is great. Again, my name is Britta Petersen. I'm a farm bill biologist with Pheasants Forever. I am based out of Richland Center in the southwest part of the state and cover 9 counties down here. We have 7 farm bill biologists on our team. And so we actually cover, this is our map, we cover all 72 counties. And so our job is basically to help landowners with their habitat goals on their property. So anybody can ask for a site visit. And so I'll provide a link for our Find a Biologist page, but at any point you can ask any one of our biologists to come and help make those goals happen. So for where we're going today, we're just going to talk about what our pollinator species are and why should we care. You guys are all here because we care about our pollinators, but I wanted to provide some facts and information that maybe you can share with others. Then the bread and butter part of the presentation is ways to create that pollinator habitat. And then at the end, just go over briefly the funding options that are available for landowners out there. But what species are pollinators? A lot of times we think of, I think, that iconic monarch butterfly or potentially a bumblebee, but there are a lot of species that are considered pollinators. We have our social and solitary bees. So 90% of our bees are actually solitary and where the female is building the nest, and a majority are non-aggressive and stingless. Our bumblebees, they perform that buzz pollination, which means they grab the flower in their jaws and then they vibrate those wing muscles in order to dislodge pollen. Bumblebees can fly in cooler temperatures and lower light levels. So you'll see these guys earlier in the morning and then later in the evening. Butterflies and moths, they sip nectar and they actually can transport pollen over longer distances than bees can. And like we talked about a little earlier, the monarchs are here in Wisconsin. So if you are able to get outside, take a look for those monarchs and see if you can find some. Flies are also considered pollinators. They are generalist foragers, so you're going to see them on a lot of different types of flowers. And then our beetles are actually considered pollinators as well. They are the most diverse group of organisms in the world and are technically our first insect pollinators. They are clumsy and bulky, and they'll land on a flower and then crawl across those blossoms. So they look for larger, more open flowers. Wasps also are considered pollinators, but more minor or kind of incidental pollination. They generally help with keeping predator insect populations in check and then managing other pests. They're mostly solitary and non-aggressive. Sometimes we might have run-ins with them at the camp table though. Birds and bats are also considered pollinators. We're probably all familiar with the ruby-throated hummingbird, as most of you mentioned. That was your favorite species. But bats are also pollinators and generally more in the tropic areas. But as you can see from this picture, they're moving a lot of pollen. So why we should care is that pollinators add over $200 billion to our global economy. And honeybees alone are responsible for up to $5.4 billion in egg productivity. And the stat that surprises me just about every time I see it is that 1 out of every 3 bites of food our pollinators are bringing us. So that is just mind-blowing. And so they provide pollination services to over 180,000 species and over 1,200 crop species. And our pollinator populations are in decline in many parts of the world. So our beekeepers are losing more of their bees each year. 28% of our bumblebees have declined, including the rusty patch bumblebee, which we have here in Wisconsin. It was the first bee species listed as endangered in the US. 19% of our butterflies are at risk of extinction, including our friend the monarch, which has experienced 80 to 97% declines in its overwintering populations. So is it time to throw in the towel? No, it's not. Okay, so we've got ways that we can help those pollinators. So we've got seven tips here for helping our pollinators. So the first place to start is to assess. So if you're owning property, you need to look at what you have. Take a tour of the property and see what's currently there. You actually might have locations of native plants on your property already that are kind of hiding in some weeds. You know, so really taking a look at what's there. I think as a farm bill biologist, when we're visiting with landowners, a lot of our time is spent on plant ID, because just trying to figure out what you have is that first step. And really taking that assessment throughout the whole season, and not just one snapshot, because you might have some species that are blooming early and mid and late, you know, so you really got to kind of take that whole approach to looking at what you have. And some ways to do that assessment, I would say, is, again, ask a farm bill biologist for a visit. That's what we do. That's what we're good at. So ask for a visit. I'm kind of old school, so I like books. So I started with the plant ID books. These are the 3 that I use probably the most often. Wisconsin has an organization called the Prairie Enthusiasts, which some of you might be aware of. But they are full of folks that are really excited about prairies and really passionate about plants and flowers. And so finding a chapter member there would be a good start as well. Minnesota and Illinois Wildflowers both are really good websites for trying to identify, or to help you identify native plants. They're really, really user-friendly and easy to do. And then for folks that are a little more tech savvy, there's some apps out there that are really great as well. So Wisconsin Wildflowers is, of course, on for our plant species, but you can look by flower color, by type, location. That'll help get you to some options. iNaturalist is an app that you can look at plants and everything else. You submit a picture and it makes recommendations. And then both the Seek app and Google Lens is kind of neat, because you can basically just hover over a species and it'll give you some recommendations. Plants are a lot easier because they don't move, but it actually, I've been messing around with it the last week and it's been pretty good on insects as well. So you can give that a try. So the number 2 thing is to plant for pollinators. And that means using native species. The native perennial species are best adapted to those local growing seasons, the local climates, and the soil types. Most of our pollinators kind of feed on those specific plants. So utilizing a mix of those types of plants when deciding what to put in there is really important. So for example, our hummingbirds look for long tubular flowers, whereas a sweat bee is looking for more open-faced flowers. And like our Carner blue butterfly, they need lupin, or lupine, as some may say. And so you want to make sure that you're providing as many of those different species in a small location. And those native planting opportunities are everywhere. If you own a lot of land and you have that opportunity to plant at field scale, then that is fantastic. But maybe you don't. Maybe you just have enough space for a flower garden, for a window box even. But those native plantings are an opportunity to help our pollinators. You want to use species so that you have a continuous bloom. So when you're looking at seed mixes or designing a seed mix, you look for generally it's early, mid, and late bloomers is how they're kind of broken up. And so really you want to try to find species that provide something from as early as possible to as late as possible. So it's really critical when you're doing these plantings to have a variety in species, in color, and flower structure. So some of our examples here, these are some early bloomers. You got spiderworts on the left, penstemon in the middle, and golden alexanders on the right. So you can see here these flowers are all have different flower structure to them, open and tubular and more panicled, and there's different color and different heights and vegetation structure as well. Here's some mid bloomers. We got some butterfly milkweed, blazing star, yellow coneflower, and monarda. So again, variety of color, structure, and floral diversity here. Here's our late bloomers, goldenrod on the left, New England aster in the middle, and some round-headed bush clover on the right. And then don't forget about the native grasses. If we're planting prairies, there's gonna be grass in a mix, but they also can provide nesting sites in those grass clumps, but also in some of the stems that stand up over winter is also providing habitat for our pollinators. And then don't forget about our native shrubs. I think sometimes we forget about those, but they are great opportunities for more pollinator habitat, but they're also really great for birds and other wildlife. So incorporating shrub plantings into a habitat component is really critical. In these pictures here, we have some nannyberry, wild plum, 9-bark, and a gray dogwood. The third thing is to provide nesting habitat. So starting off with, if you have a patch out in the yard that's maybe full of some brambles and some species that have pithy stems, those are really important and easy to leave standing over winter, because our cavity nesters will go in there and use those stems to nest over winter. So instead of cutting them down in the fall time when they're done, just leave them standing over winter, and that can provide habitat. Another thing is, if you're looking for maybe a project with the kids, or if you're kind of a do-it-yourself person, you can look at building some bee boxes or nest boxes. You just want to make sure that there's a variety of diameter of holes, and that one end of those things are closed up. And there's a lot of different, you can look online, there's a lot of different opportunities for plans and that type of thing. You could purchase them even. So you can build those. Some people go and build the bee hotels, where are more works of art than anything, but how fantastic is this? But again, you can see the variety of diameter and holes and structure that's out there. So these are pretty great, but understanding not everybody can build these guys. And then our ground nesters, don't forget about those. Having a location that's kind of cleaned up of veg, that's sunny and well drained, is really important. On looking for an open south-facing slope. Those are, having that bare soil is important. And so a big thing with this too is just that reduced tillage. So find areas that you can, you don't have to till, but also even in an ag setting, whether it's a garden or, using some cover crops rather than constant tillage, is really important to protect our ground nesting species. Number 4 is a mix of things as far as utilizing some marginal areas. So things like hedgerows, floral strips, habitat corridors, and marginal areas. So maybe you've got some strip of land that's next to a creek or to a wetland. And that might be a location that would be really cool to have some native pollinator habitat. Or maybe you've got an area that's extremely weedy and invasive species, are the majority of the component. Well, that might be the place to take a look at getting rid of your invasive species and then trying to plant those habitat in there, and really trying to link up habitats too, using some of these strips to link up greater habitat, so you create a bigger block. The key really with this one is using what you have. So in the upper picture on the left, there's a lady from the Twin Cities who, that was the space she had, was this little strip between the sidewalk and the road. So, instead of keeping in grass, she planted natives. The picture on the lower right, that's a DOT picture where instead of mowing that entire median, they planted pollinator habitat in there. So also, again, even things like septic fields or mound system, or in a big ag setting in the pivot corners, those are all opportunities for utilizing those marginal areas. This is kind of just a snapshot of kind of a continuum of some habitat, where you've got your crop on your far left, you've got a little bit of a buffer there where it's open, and then you start into your vegetation where it's our native forbs and shrubs. Got a nest block with some, again, those brambles and pithy stem species. And then here it has a picture of some dead branches and snags, which can also be important, especially on that woodland edge. Because you'll have beetles that might burrow a hole in there at some point, and then our other pollinators will come in and use those holes. So retaining dead branches and snags is also important. And especially if you have a potential for water, that's really great too, because not only does it have opportunities for some bare soil, but as you get closer to water, diversity tends to increase, and species like willows can be really important for early queens that are out looking for a forage, because they're early bloomers. So the pesticide use, which we kind of talked about a little bit before, if you can avoid pesticide use, that is really critical. And there definitely is some organic options, and I would second that Xerxes Society, which I'll have some information about later, is really the best place to go for that. They have some great literature and information on the options for organic methods for site prep if you're looking to do a planting. Sometimes it is impossible and is part of the system to use that, but if it is the case, there are some steps that you can take to minimize the impact. So for example, the picture on the top right is a cut stump treatment of invasive shrubs. So that's where you're cutting the stump, you're applying that chemical directly to that stump and it's staying right there, instead of, for example, using a foliar spray on something where maybe the shrub is 5 to 7 feet tall and you're out, you know, you can't spray those foliar leaves up so high. So here it's directly to that species. And then again, in more of like the ag setting, looking at, you know, not spraying when it's extremely windy. You're not spraying your crops while they're in bloom. If you have to use an insecticide, that it's selective and not a broad spectrum one. And then really it's critical with the timing, methods, and the equipment used for spraying. Things like using low pressure and nozzles that'll create the biggest droplet so that they're heavier, so that there's less chance for dispersal. There's things like hoods that go over some of those sprayers to, again, keep it right over the plant and not dispersing. And then using things like buffers or field borders, again, can help. Number 6 is the placement of your pollinator habitat. So you might have your farmyard or your house location, but trying to think about it, pulling up just a little bit, so you're looking at a little bit more of a larger scale and how the adjacent land is being used and how your pollinator planting is going to fit in. So your picture on the picture on the left here is a farmyard, but you can see it's pretty much surrounded by all ag fields. And so if those fields, say, are getting sprayed, you know, you don't want to put your pollinator habitat on the outside edge of your farm. This is something where you want to definitely look, if you're going to do something, to put it on the interior, if that's the case. The picture on the right is, you know, where they've got some ag adjacent to their farmyard, but it looks like they've got a lot of green space in there and a lot of green space that's getting mowed. So, you know, maybe it's a twofold effort here in that you are reducing some of your mowing, but also if you're planting that pollinator habitat, they've got a good opportunity for that interior planting rather than pushing it out on the edge. This is out of a pamphlet that's actually from Xerxes Society that kind of goes through some opportunities to do multiple things on a farm. So the first thing is a bee pasture. And so that's where you use clover, cover crops, kind of just allowing it to be as it is. And then if you have veggies, for example, planting in a field where you've got broccoli, kale, basil, you're allowing some of those things to bolt. Fallow areas, again, like we said, if you have areas of bramble, but areas just where grass can kind of do its thing, and it is a good option and good habitat and nesting habitat. Riparian areas, again, is providing a clean water source. Also, that diversity seems to increase by water, so you get a lot of species, and again, things like willows that are really good early bloomers. Then we've got some field or road borders, which is next to a field. If you leave them untilled and not sprayed, you know, that's kind of targeting your ground nesters right there. If you have a garden, which is, you know, it can be whether veggies, flowers, herbs, a mix of things. Again, leaving a couple of those species to bolt at certain times, so that's providing some flowers, is great. There's our bee block, so giving that cavity nesting opportunity immediately adjacent, great. And up in that top is just a natural kind of undeveloped area that may harbor a lot of pollinators already. And some of those periphery outer edges might be a great place to engage with your neighbors about, hey, maybe we can work together to create bigger blocks, or you know, just work at protecting this shared space. And then this is an example. This is actually my family's property in northern Polk County. We've been doing a little bit of habitat work in just the last couple years. And so just wanted to give a good example here. We planted these 2 fields in pollinator habitat last spring, so just on year 2. And then this little space right here, just in April this year, we planted about 450 native shrubs. And so we're really trying to provide some continuous habitat, which works because these 2 fields are basically just hay and clover fields that my uncle who farms cuts for hay once, maybe twice a year. And so, but with those fields, those areas, and then our area on the southwest, it's kind of all swampy and fallowy. We have a good block of continuous habitat. And now our neighbor to the east, he always has a hay field over there. And so he doesn't spray, he just hays it. So, you know, if he was cropping over there, then that's where maybe we'd look at adding some trees to that field border. So there's a buffer there, but the way it's set up, this is, you know, we're pretty happy and excited to see things get going in this area. Number 7, the last thing is to spread the word and join where you can. So maybe those of you guys out on the call today, maybe you don't have a lot of property, and that's okay. You know, you have that knowledge, so sharing that knowledge with your friends, your families, and neighbors who potentially do have the opportunity for land, then you can make a difference that way. Another way you can is to join or donate to those groups that are doing habitat work, like Pheasants Forever or the Prairie Enthusiasts. There's a lot of groups out there that are doing fantastic things. And then also there's an opportunity to participate in citizen science. We're pretty lucky that here in Wisconsin, we have a lot of opportunities. The DNR runs the Bumblebee Brigade, which monitors bees and helps identify species. The Monarch Collaborative is with the Natural Resource Foundation, and they do the same thing, a lot of monarch monitoring. And Monarch Joint Venture and Project Wingspan also are here in the upper Midwest and have citizen science opportunities. So just to recap, our ways to help pollinators is number 1, assess what you have. Number 2 is grow native species. Number 3 is provide nesting sites. Number 4 is to utilize those marginal areas, link up habitats where you can. Number 5 is to limit or have strategic use of your pesticides. Number 6 is look at large scale, see where your habitat planting fits in. And number 7, something we can all do, is share with others. So just briefly, you're going to go through our funding and cost share options that are available through the Farm Bill and then through some other agencies or NGOs. The Conservation Reserve Program is something that probably more people are familiar with, or CRP, which is where a producer receives an annual payment to take environmentally sensitive crop ground out of production and put it into conservation cover, whether that's a basic prairie, a diverse pollinator planting, a prairie strip is the bottom picture here, or a riparian buffer. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, provides financial and technical assistance to folks in order to address resource concerns. So how that generally works is that it's a cost sharing up to 75% to install practices. And there's over 100 different practices as part of EQIP, from cover crops to field borders to native shrub planting to pollinator planting. So there's a lot of options. And then the last Farm Bill program is a Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, which helps producers maintain and improve their existing conservation systems and adopt additional activities to address those resource concerns. So basically that just means folks that have used EQIP already potentially, or just that are doing good conservation work on their property, and it allows them to have financial and technical assistance to do even more. And then those other options, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a partners program, which is work for help with work on private land. The DNR has a couple of different programs for that same reason. County land conservation departments have opportunities for cost sharing. And Pheasants Forever chapters, we have 30 in the state, and a majority of them do work on private land. So if you're all confused by the alphabet soup that is the government programs, don't worry, because you are not alone. How I would fix that is to say to contact a Farm Bill biologist. That is our job, is to navigate those Farm Bill programs and to help landowners understand and work through them. The good thing about our job is that we also have really good relationships with other agencies and other organizations. And so maybe if a Farm Bill program doesn't work right for your property, we know the people that and program who might, and so we can get you to the right person. So this is a picture of a couple of our biologists out doing their thing with landowners. So this is a couple of different places that you can go to check out some more information. I would highly, highly recommend going to Xerces Society. A bunch of the pollinator pictures the insect pictures that I used are from Xerces Society. They have so much good information, including the organic site prep. There's actually a document that's about 80 pages and not just the 2 pages that was shown before. So it really dives deep into those practices. But even things like cover cropping for pollinators, farming with bees, those types of things, and as well as seed mixes and recommendations for monarchs, for pollinators, they have a lot of good information. The Pollinator Partnership also has a lot of good info and opportunities to help do some citizen science. And then the Wisconsin DNR and UW Extension, again, has good information, but also has opportunities to donate to do work right here in the state. And then just to get it out there, this is our event that our Farm Bill biologist Carissa in Central Wisconsin and our Tomorrow River chapter of Pheasants Forever is hosting on June 12th. It's at a property that is 80 acres that was restored specifically for Carn Blue habitat. And it's kind of just meant to be a come and go as you please, but you can drive through the property, you can walk on trails, there's guided tours and door prizes and raffles. So if if this would be of interest, it's in Marquette County, June 12th. So I have several of the things I've talked about today. I'll share those links on a page that will get sent out to all of you on the call today. And so if we didn't get this in the chat already, then it'll be on that page, the registration. So if this is of interest, I definitely recommend checking it out. So in conclusion, I'll just say that there are so many things that you can do to help our pollinators, from small scale to large scale. And so the best thing you can do is to talk about it, to share with others, and do what you can. So I just say a big thank you to all of you for participating, for joining. If anybody has any questions at all, my contact information is here and will also be sent out to everyone. And so thank you again, and let's get out there and plant some pollinator habitat.